Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kendrick. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Football is here. Before we get into the slated topics for today, I want to go ahead and talk about this. So, I think in about maybe 2 podcasts ago, something like that, I talked about Colin Kaepernick, and I talked about how I felt like he was not going to get back into the NFL. If there's anything 2020 has shown me, with all the murders at the hands of police that's been going on, from George Floyd, to what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and I know Ahmaud Arbery wasn't involving police, but he was still flat out murdered, and the police didn't do anything about it. As of right now, I don't exactly know what went on with the case. The last report I saw was that the men had been arrested, or there was at least a warrant out for their arrest, but since then I haven't really seen any updates. I'll probably have to go ahead and look that up myself and see what's going on with that case. But if you remember, during all this time, especially specifically after George Floyd's murder, there were all these reports that teams were really, really interested in Kaepernick, because what these incidents proved, and the fact that we could see it on camera, what these incidents proved was that Colin Kaepernick was right in his stance. And you had all these teams coming out, all these teams making statements about it. You had all these coaches, all these coming out in support of Kaepernick, saying he was right, and he was right to protest, and he was everything. And you saw all these reports coming out that teams were interested in him. Oh, there's like 5 teams that are interested in Kaepernick. And I actually thought there was a real chance Colin Kaepernick would get signed. I thought there was a real chance he would get signed because from a PR standpoint, it would look great. It would just, especially if it was like the Minnesota Vikings that went ahead and signed him. That would look outstanding. If it was the Seattle Seahawks, how great it would look. If the 49ers even decided to bring him back, how good it would look for them. There were so many teams that could have brought him in. The Chargers, Anthony Lynn, their head coach, came out and said that Colin Kaepernick is definitely on their workout list, but they do like their quarterback room, but he's on the workout list. Pete Carroll saying, well, we met with him. I don't exactly remember why it is that we didn't sign him, but I kind of wish that we did. Yeah, right. Well, recent reports and speculation have been kind of circling over the weekend, and there is a consensus feeling now that all the hype built around Kaepernick and whether or not a team was going to sign him was, I guess, to quote number 45 in the White House, it was fake news. There were no teams that were really interested. All that hype was just that. It was just hype. It was just teams taking, the popular stance and saying, oh yeah, no, we're definitely interested in him. And then ultimately, no teams did anything about him. And I'm not really sure how to characterize this, but I'm surprised and I'm not. I'm surprised because I thought that with everything that was going on and how popular Kaepernick had become and how the majority of America is now on Kaepernick's side and people agree that he actually had something to protest for, I'm surprised no team took a shot at signing him, just for the simple fact that from a PR standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, how good they would look, they'd be on the right side of history, you would assume. In some people's eyes it wouldn't be, but in a lot of people's eyes it would be on the right side of history. You'd assume somebody would sign Kaepernick. The Minnesota Vikings, the Chargers, the Seahawks, the Niners, there's so many teams that could have used his services. Jacksonville, even, if they really wanted to get Minshew out of there and get a really good name to sell tickets, to the limited tickets that would actually, I guess, be sold, but you want to fill all those seats, Kaepernick would be an option. I'm surprised from that aspect. But from the aspect I'm not surprised on is because I think about it and I'm like, with everything Kaepernick has had to deal with the NFL, and for as long as he has not played National Football League football, all the lawsuits, him getting accusing whether it be Pete Carroll or Jerry Jones, the multitude of head coaches and owners that were being investigated for collusion against Kaepernick, Roger Goodell, everyone. Why would they let him back in? Just because all of a sudden it's popular? So I can understand it kind of from both sides, and it's just unfortunate. So like I say, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, because I do see it from both sides. But yeah, my conclusion is that Kaepernick's time in the NFL is in fact done. But anyways, we do have some stuff to talk about today. I want to talk about Josh Rosen. Patriots players apparently wanted Brady gone. Following the 2018 season, his attitude got a bit different. I want to talk about that. Some very, very interesting reports revolving around the Patriots and Brady as of recent. Deshaun Watson got an extension from the Texans. I want to talk about how I feel like it'll affect Dak. And then my final topic of the day, I'm going to rank my top 10 games for week 1 of the NFL. I think there's a lot of good games. I'm going to rank the 10 that I am looking forward to the most. So stay tuned for that. But anyways, so, of course, I've mentioned this countless times, 2020 is an oddball year. Nothing has been ordinary. For me, for you, for everybody. Life just has not been able to be the same. I remember at the beginning of this year, we were all, January, February, we were all still chilling, and then March hit, and then everything just kind of went down. And sometimes it goes back up, and then everything goes back down, and it's up and down, and this year has just been a roller coaster of emotions. One thing that this year has provided, though, is a lot of interesting stories as it pertains to sports. Number 1 is, can the sports even go on? Number 2, what's the sport going to look like if it does come back? Are there going to be fans? What's going to happen here? And if you look specifically at the NFL, it's, what are these rookie quarterbacks going to look like? How are these teams going to look that have new head coaches and new quarterbacks, or a new complete offensive system? To the teams where they've lost, 5, 6, 7 players due to opt-outs, what are these teams going to look like? What are the teams that are the most, which teams are going to succeed the most? Is it going to be the experienced teams? Is it going to be the teams with the less turnover? All these different stories are out there right now, and I'm interested in all of them. But there's one story in the NFL that I don't believe is going to get any headlines. I don't believe people are really going to be talking about it. I just don't think it's going to receive much attention this year, or maybe even next year. But I am very interested in this story. And it's the story of Josh Rosen. Can we talk about Josh Rosen for a second? This guy, once upon a time, was a high draft pick of the Arizona Cardinals in the first round. He was their first round pick. And coming into the NFL, there were those who thought that he could be a day one starter, those who thought he was the most pro-ready quarterback in his draft. Out of Mayfield and Darnold and Allen and Lamar, they thought that Rosen was probably the most pro-ready. Fast forward, he's the worst of the bunch, and I don't even think that's fair to say, because we haven't really seen him have a fair chance, but so far he's the worst of the bunch. But coming in the NFL, those who thought that he was the most pro-ready, there were those who thought he needed a year to sit, there were those that thought that he could start maybe in the middle of the season, you don't start him day one, give him some time to watch. There were just all these different kinds of reports on Josh Rosen. Well, the Cardinals, they had their starter for the season, and it was Sam Bradford. Now, most people thought, especially if you know Sam Bradford's history, at some point in time he's gonna get hurt. And at some point in time Rosen is going to see the field. Who would have known it would have been in, game 2 of the season? Now, in fairness to Sam Bradford and to Josh Rosen, the Cardinals roster was not great. Their offensive line was, I think, maybe that year ranked like 30th, 31st. It could have been the last one. Their offensive line was terrible. The talent around the team was terrible. They had a player here and there. On defense, it was Chandler Jones and it's Peterson. On offense, it was really Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson back when he seemed to know how to play. There wasn't a whole lot of talent there to work with. But after about a game and a half, Sam Bradford not only was benched, he was actually cut. And the Cardinals went ahead and started Josh Rosen. Now, Josh Rosen's rookie year was not great. It was nothing to cheer for. I think at the end of the season, Josh Rosen won 3 games, and it was 2 against the woeful Niners, who just can't seem to win without Jimmy Garoppolo, and against the Packers when they were struggling, and it was with Aaron Rodgers starting too. So those were his 3 big wins against the Niners and the Packers. Overall, not a great year. 11 touchdowns, 14 picks, didn't look great. It was just kind of, okay, chalk this up to, it was the growing pains year. This team is not very good. We can't expect a whole lot out of Rosen. No one said he was an Andrew Luck or John Elway kind of talent, Peyton Manning kind of talent. No one said this. He can't just carry a bad team and make them great like an Andrew Luck. So we're going to go ahead and wait until next year. The thing was that the Cardinals had the number 1 overall pick, and Kyler Murray was coming out. And then all of a sudden you see these reports. They really like Kyler Murray. I don't know, they like him. They like Cliff Kingsbury, and they fired their head coach. As soon as they fired their head coach, everyone thought, okay, they're going after Kingsbury, aren't they? Oh my God, they're going to draft a quarterback. And sure enough, what did they do? They draft a quarterback. They kept Rosen on the roster a little bit, said they were going to battle it out. All of a sudden, they traded him to Miami. So he goes from woefully bad Cardinals that could barely win a game. They could only beat, really, if we're going to be honest, bad teams. The Packers that year were not good. And when it came to the Niners, as soon as Jimmy Garoppolo was hurt, not good either. So they couldn't beat any winning teams. Their offensive line was terrible. Their receiving core outside of Larry Fitzgerald was not good. And you guys just gave up on Rosen like that. You gave up on your head coach like that. It was a really, really dirty way of handling the situation. I do not think the Cardinals gave the head coach a fair shot. I do not believe they gave Rosen a fair shot. But nonetheless, they traded him to Miami. And now he needs to battle for the starting quarterback job over Ryan Fitzpatrick. Originally, he couldn't do it. Miami goes into the season with Fitzpatrick, but this is the season people thought it was going to be called tanking for Tua. They thought the Dolphins, given all the moves they had made, they were tanking for Tua. Well, the season begins, Ryan Fitzpatrick's going out there, he's playing. A couple games into the season, they go ahead and they bench him, and they put Josh Rosen in. And again, his stats are not great. I think he finished the season, he didn't finish the season, but in the games he played, I think he had like 1 touchdown to 5 interceptions. Now, I did see a montage video put together online. Someone went ahead and they went back to every Miami game, and they basically looked at every single throw of Josh Rosen's. And they wanted to see, did any touchdowns get dropped? Did any of the receivers absolutely fail him? And I remember watching this video. There are about 7 throws that Josh Rosen made where he put the ball on the money and the receiver flat out dropped it, and I think at least 6 of the 7 should have been for touchdowns. They were on go routes, they were routes where the receiver completely beat the DB and they were in open space. It was not good. Josh Rosen did not have a whole lot of help in Miami. And if you really want to think about it, the Cardinals roster compared to Miami's roster, which one was really worse? If you just go back to those 2 years individually, which roster was really worse? I mean, maybe you could say Miami's was just better coached, but it still wasn't very good. It was not much better than the Cardinals. So Josh Rosen went from one bad situation to another bad situation. It was just a bad situation, maybe with a little bit more of a future. But nonetheless, they didn't let Rosen finish the season. They put Fitzpatrick back in. They won some games towards the end of the year. I think they finished going 5-4 in their final 9 games. And they went ahead and they had another top 5 pick. And sure enough, they draft Tua. So now Rosen's sitting here with the Dolphins, not only battling Fitzpatrick because they re-signed him, but now he has to deal with Tua. And they're battling in camp, And even though there's reports coming out saying that both quarterbacks kind of look the same, Rosen actually might even be outperforming Tua a little bit, there was no way in hell they were going to keep Rosen and Tua on the team. I just didn't see it happening. And sure enough, what did they do? They cut Rosen. Now, they went ahead and they did field some calls for Rosen, but no one wanted to trade for him. No one was interested enough like that, and they cut him. Rosen could have gone anywhere. He was a free agent. He went through waiver wires. No one claimed him because they didn't want him at that price tag. And he went through wires. He had the freedom to sign wherever he wanted. For the first time in his NFL career, in just year 3, he was a free agent. And where does he decide to go? There were teams that apparently contacted him and told him that they have a roster spot waiting for him. They are ready to give him a role as one of their quarterbacks immediately. He'd be on the team. He'd be on the 53-man roster. No worries. But instead, he decides, nope, I'm going to go to the Tampa Bay practice squad. I'm not going to be on the 53-man roster. I am going to go to a practice squad. Remember what I said about Jadeveon Clowney in my last podcast? I said that I thought Clowney was going to Tennessee, not for money reasons. He did not sign with them for a money grab. He signed with them because of the situation he would be in. He'd be reunited with Mike Vrabel, who was the defensive coordinator when he had his best 2 seasons in Houston. And he wanted that familiarity. He thinks he can go to Tennessee and with his old defensive coordinator, have a good season, get back out there on the market, and capitalize in on the payday that he wants. Do I think it's going to work out for him necessarily that way? I don't think so, but I hope so. I hope it works out the best for him. But sometimes you go to a place just because of the situation. Think about some of the quarterbacks in the NFL that sat before they ever played a game, before they ever started a game, before they ever even attempted a pass. You think about guys like Jimmy Garoppolo. He sat behind Brady for a long time before ever actually seeing game action. Aaron Rodgers. You think about Patrick Mahomes. You think about Drew Lock last year, or Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. A lot of quarterbacks have sat before they actually saw live game action. Even if you're a first round pick. Drew Lock obviously a second round pick, but you know, high picks, high first round picks, high second round picks, these guys who are actually slated to be the starter, a lot of these guys do end up sitting. Now, no one usually sits as long as Jimmy Garoppolo did. No one sits as long as Aaron Rodgers did anymore. Jordan Love, he might, because he's going to start the season on the bench as well behind Aaron Rodgers, surprisingly. But this stuff is just normal. And it has shown to actually help these quarterbacks. It helps to not always throw them in the fire where they get killed. Josh Rosen was thrown into the fire and got killed his rookie year. But Rosen, think about the adversity he's had to deal with. The Cardinals drafting him high and giving up on him after 1 year. Going to Miami, not even really getting a shot to be the starter there. And then they still draft a quarterback, and they cut him. Now, Rosen has shown so far to be a really good soldier. He has played, he has practiced, he has done whatever these teams have asked him to do. He has handled the business so far very well. I haven't seen a single article where Rosen was demanding a trade, where Rosen was wanting better, where he was expecting better. I haven't seen a single article like that. By all accounts, he has gone to work, kept his mouth shut, and has just tried to play. Well, now he goes to Tampa Bay. And who's at Tampa Bay? Tom Brady, who's been in the business about as long as Josh Rosen has been alive. So he has him to learn from. Now, would Brady necessarily feel like giving advice? How much would they see each other? I don't really know. But I do know, I'm pretty sure if Rosen wanted to ask Brady for some advice, I'm sure Brady would be willing to lend a hand. He has Bruce Arians as the head coach there to learn from. Bruce Arians has a great history with quarterbacks when it comes to just being able to make it work. Whether it's Winston, or Palmer, or Stanton, or Luck, he gets results from his quarterbacks, no matter what. Blaine Gabbert, he made Blaine Gabbert work. And maybe not necessarily look like a full-on starter. He didn't make him look like Andrew Luck, but he made him look passable. He made him look like at least an average to below average starter. So he just knows how to make it work with quarterbacks. And speaking of Gabbert, that is another guy I feel like Rosen should take advantage of learning from. Blaine Gabbert. See, Tom Brady, he wasn't a first-round pick. And Bruce Arians wasn't either. Bruce Arians is a head coach. But Blaine Gabbert was a first-round pick of Jacksonville to be their franchise quarterback. And he flamed out of Jacksonville very quickly. He did not last. If there's anybody who can relate to Josh Rosen, it should be Blaine Gabbert. He can tell Rosen, about, this is someone Rosen could talk to about how did Gabbert deal with being drafted high in the first round, to being the franchise quarterback of Jacksonville, to it just not working. Now, in Rosen's case, it didn't work after a freaking year. At least with Gabbert, he got more than a season with Jacksonville. But nonetheless, he still flamed out, it didn't work, and he's carved out a nice career for himself as a backup. He's good for at least maybe a game, maybe 2 games. If you don't build the system completely around his arm and you let him run, you let him do his thing, he can win a game for you. He can win a game or 2. He can keep you competitive. But all in all, Gabbert is a nice backup, low-end starter. He's been around the business. He knows how it works. He knows what you have to do to at least keep getting a job as a backup in the league. This is somebody Rosen, I feel like, could really talk to, pick the brain of him. Hopefully he was picking the brain of Fitzpatrick while he was in Miami. I think Rosen, in the long run, could be a starter. And the reason why I think so is because I think he's dealt with so much adversity in his career and he's gotten such a good view of what this business could be for him if you don't take it, this could be what could happen if you don't take it seriously. If you step out of line, if you fall out of favor with the business, this is the kind of thing that can happen to you. I think the only reason why Rosen will continue to get chances, at least for the next few years, is because other teams out there know he did not get a fair shot with either team. And there are teams out there who believe that maybe they could actually get to see what this kid really is when you surround him with some good pieces. And Tampa Bay has some good pieces. So I'm interested to see how this all plays out, but just think about that whole story. I mean, how many stories would be better than Rosen's climb to if he could become a starting quarterback one day? I mean, maybe Kurt Warner? Warren Moon? Maybe? Rosen, if he could become a starter within these next few years and actually be a successful starter, he would have one of the all-time great stories in sports in general. If he could go from all of this to one day being the franchise quarterback of a team and being successful, that would be just outstanding. I'm really pulling for Josh Rosen. I hope he makes the most of his time in Tampa Bay, and I'm hoping that maybe Tampa Bay or another team gives him a shot next year. Because again, I just don't feel like he's gotten a fair shake in the NFL so far. But I guess we'll wait and see. The NFL has a history of kind of throwing players away, especially once a narrative's kind of been said about them. There is a narrative surrounding Josh Rosen, but so far it seems like other teams know that he hasn't been given a real shot yet. And some other teams probably look at themselves as a team to give him a real shot, so I'm interested to see where his career goes. Anyways, coming up next. Speaking of Brady, apparently there were some players with the Patriots that wanted him gone from the team following the 2018 season. We're going to talk about that up next.
Listen up, sports bettors. This is Bryson Ethan here to tell you about our favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. We only endorse one sports book, and that is BetUS.com. Why, you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid.
That's right, Bryce. You need a sports book that offers everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. So call today at 1-800-MyBetUS. That's 1-800-MyBetUS, and they will walk you through getting started. Nobody in the industry gives better bonuses or bigger bonuses than BetUS. Join now, mention GSMC, and you get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. We bet at BetUS, and so should you. So join BetUS today. That's BetUS.com, or call 1-800-MyBetUS, mention GSMC, and get 150% in bonuses on your first deposit.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Josh Rosen and his, I guess you could say, his tumultuous first 3 years in the NFL. Again, I think Josh Rosen really could have one of the all-time great quarterback sports stories in general if he one day can become a starter. Given everything that he has had to experience, I do not believe it is far off to say. If one day he became the starting quarterback of a franchise, was able to lead the team into the playoffs, or just be a really high-level starter, whatever it might be, I think that would be simply fantastic, and I would personally be very, very happy to see Rosen actually get a shot with a good team surrounded with a good cast, because I feel like every quarterback should have the opportunity to do so. Every player should be put in the best situation to succeed, but unfortunately, that is just not exactly how the NFL works, and that's kind of why I also feel like if the Jags do in fact tank for Trevor Lawrence, and they decide to replace Gardner Minshew, I think the real winner in that situation is probably Gardner Minshew. Because I think another team would be willing to give Minshew a shot to be the quarterback of their team, given what we've seen from him so far in Jacksonville. You know, we'll see what this year looks like. This is probably not going to be the best year too for him, but I'm interested to see it nonetheless. And I want to go ahead and say this before we get into the second topic. At the beginning of the podcast, I talked about Kaepernick and everything, and the fact that he's not on the team, and the fact that I don't think he'll get on the team. For anybody who disagrees with me and thinks that I'm just too in love with Kaepernick and that, oh, one day he'll get on the team, you're just being ridiculous. Let me just say this right now. When Josh McCown gets a practice squad job to be the Philadelphia Eagles' emergency starter, their emergency quarterback, and Kaepernick can't even get on a practice squad, do not, just stop. That is insane. The fact that Kaepernick can't even get a job on a practice squad, but Josh McCown can at age 41, making him the oldest practice squad player in NFL history, don't even get me started. That is insanity to the highest degree. I don't understand it. I don't think there's any way to justify it. It is so blatant at this point. The fact that Josh McCown can get a practice squad job, but Kaepernick still, even after everything that has happened in 2020, can't get a job, I will say that is a bogus move. It is bogus of the NFL that this man still does not have a job. EA did put him back in the game. I don't know why they ever removed him from the game in the first place, but they did. EA went ahead and put him into the new game. I played the new game, by the way. It's not good. We're gonna go ahead and move off this, but I just wanted to say that I think it's so blatant as to why Kaepernick still isn't getting a job, and I think Josh McCown, even though Josh McCown's a great man, he's a great man, great father, I think he's funny as hell. And he's carved out a very nice career for himself as a backup and as a bubble starter. I don't blame him for taking the job, but I just think it's garbage that the Eagles can offer him that job, but can't offer it to Kaepernick. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and get into this. So, Brady left New England kind of abruptly. It was kind of expected, but people thought that there was a good chance he would still come back if the Patriots just gave him a bit more money. Turns out he was done with the Patriots, and he was done specifically with Bill Belichick, and he went over to Tampa Bay, where he has the best supporting cast he has probably ever had in his career, outside of his 2007 year when they had Randy Moss and everything just clicked, and he had one of the best quarterback seasons of all time, and it was one of the greatest teams of all time until the Super Bowl. But as it pertains to this article, so a journalist for the Boston Sports Journal, Greg Bedard, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, I could be wrong. He wrote a column explaining the piece Patriots players felt with Brady leaving. And I'm not going to read this exact quote because the quote is very clunky and it just doesn't, it just wasn't written well. But in a quote from the article, basically what Greg had, what he detailed is that since he left New England, it was pretty clear to him that the Patriots did need a vibe change because Brady's attitude basically took a turn from the worst. He was described as doer. It's either doer or dour. I believe it's pronounced doer. He was described as being doer, which started to pop up around 2018, the end of the 2018 season, and basically it took its toll on the Patriots this last year. And it was so bad that some of his teammates were admitting privately that it was probably better for all involved that Brady move on if he was going to have that same attitude going into the next season. And they note that Cam Newton has, if anything, brought the vibe change that the Patriots needed. And I mean, you just think about Cam Newton back in New England. Think about like back in the 2015 season. He was dabbing and dancing, handing footballs to the children, has that big smile, looks like a model. I mean, Cam Newton, he is all about personality. You look at the way that he dresses. Cam Newton is personality. Tom Brady isn't so much. Not saying he's a bad guy, but he doesn't have the outrageous personality that Cam Newton has, and I love Cam Newton's personality, and I never quite understood why so many people, especially out of the Boston area, were just so sure this wasn't gonna work, and they were so concerned with Cam Newton's ability to fit into New England, but he is exactly what New England needed. Now, to talk about this from the Brady point of view, I can definitely see it. I can definitely see validity to this, because think about Tom Brady. Think about some of the things that started to happen over his last few years in New England that started to pop up, these little tidbits that kind of let you know there were some problems. I remember he went on to, and he did an interview with, who was it? He did an interview with, Jim Gray. And during this interview, they asked him about if he was happy in New England. And he said that he has his moments. Asked if he's happy. He said, I have my moments. That right there lets you know, okay, so he's not really happy in New England. He then goes on to plead the fifth when he was asked if he feels New England shows him the proper appreciation. He didn't say yes, no, he said I plead the fifth. We all know what that means. Now whether he was doing it kind of just to be funny, just to kind of make the crowd laugh or not, I don't know. But he didn't answer the question. He just said, I plead the fifth. Those were two little tidbits that let people know something seemed to be wrong. You look at what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo. There were all these reports that Belichick was looking to trade Tom Brady. And that Brady went to Robert Kraft, said, do you see what Bill's doing? I am not being traded. You are not keeping Jimmy Garoppolo here. And what did they do? They traded Jimmy Garoppolo for, I think, a second-round pick to the Niners. And obviously, you see what the Niners are right now. They're again one of the favorites in the NFC to come out and go to the Super Bowl. That was another move that people say was Brady, kind of flexing his muscle for the first time ever. He went over Bill Belichick's head because he wanted to make sure he was the starter. And there's a lot of people who believe that move kind of screwed the Patriots when it came to their future, because they had a succession plan in Jimmy Garoppolo, and Brady kind of got him kicked out the back door. And then they came out with a joint statement. You had Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady coming out saying, truer heads are going to prevail and they're more together than ever as they head into the season and things are all going to be just roses and daisies and rainbows, all that good stuff. And there were those who bought it. I thought something might be going on. I did my best to kind of listen to the sports media world because where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you see a lot of reports coming out detailing there are problems, and then you just kind of have to read the tea leaves. Just look into it. Brady, what he said during the interview. Are you happy? I have my moments. Do you feel like the Patriots have shown you the proper level of appreciation? I plead the fifth. I think all you had to do was just not have your head in the ground to know that something was going on. And you think about that 2018 season. So if we just go towards the end of that 2018 season, what was the problem? Brady and the offense in general, they didn't really look the same. That whole season, they were again kind of a defensive-driven team, just as they were last year, but the thing is that last year their offense was kind of even worse. This past season, their attack was based a lot on the run game, and Brady still had a very nice year, but it wasn't the Brady that we had known. And so a lot of people thought this was the year that Brady and the Patriots got knocked off. And then of course they faced Kansas City, and they had them down, and then Kansas City came back, and they were a D4 offsides away from winning the game. And then what does Brady go on to do? He wins the lowest scoring Super Bowl of all time. I think it was 13-3. It was not entertaining. It was a defensive struggle. And there's a lot of people that don't necessarily credit Brady that year with too much of a reason for their success, because his numbers just weren't that impressive. The offense in general just wasn't that impressive, and a lot of people were thinking this could be the end of Brady. And Brady has always been one of those guys who's been who has been about TB12, keeping his body in shape, playing for as long as he can, and I think that it makes sense as to why it is that he would become a bit, as it's described, doer. And I had to actually look up this word because I had never heard to describe a person before, or really in any sentence ever. So I looked it up, and the definition of it is relentlessly severe, stern, or gloomy in manner or appearance. Now, I don't think he was ever gloomy in his appearance necessarily. Brady usually always kind of puts on a nice face. He always puts on a nice smile when he goes into work or for a press conference, whatever it is. So I don't know if he necessarily ever looked it, but his attitude-wise, being a little bit more stern, being more relentless, maybe in the way that he talks to people and when it comes to practicing and getting things right, I can definitely see his attitude might have become a little bit more unbearable. Being rigid in sports can really backfire. Think about some of the rigid personalities out there. Tom Coughlin was seen as very, very rigid, stern. His coaching style is very in your face. He's not the head coach anymore. You look at a guy like Bill Belichick. Former players of his have always come out and talked about how it's not really fun to play in New England. It's a very tight ship. Bill Belichick is relentless in his criticism and everything on people and what he expects of you. And it's not very fun. Rigid personalities can, even at quarterback, I've talked about that before, Jay Cutler, or if it's Jeff George, whoever. If you're a rigid guy, if you're relentless, it can really wear on some guys. Look at the NBA. I'm going to name one guy in the NBA. And if you know NBA, and if you know this player, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Chris Paul. He is one of the all-time great leaders in the NBA, and man, do people hate playing with him. Because he is so relentless in what he expects from you, in how he talks to people. He demands greatness. He demands you practice hard, you play hard, you do your job, and it can really wear on people. So I can understand, Brady, probably, you're nearing the end of your career, your wife is now basically telling you she has 1 foot out the door because you're not doing your job at home enough. You're at work too much. You're focused on work too much. Your surrounding pieces are getting worse because that was just the 2018 year. Think about this last year. What was the problem with New England? Their offense was terrible. They didn't have a great run game. They didn't really have a great passing game. Their offense was very, very predictable. Their defense, however, was outstanding against everybody except for the teams that were elite playoff teams. Houston, Baltimore, Chiefs. They lost that one game to Miami, but they always kind of seemed to suck against Miami in Miami. But they couldn't beat the Texans, they couldn't beat the Ravens, and they couldn't beat the Chiefs. Because their offense couldn't score enough. Brady had one of his worst statistical years. His QBR was like the lowest it had ever been in a season. He was in the bottom half of the league. You can understand Brady was probably getting really ticked off. He knew what he was working with. He had to make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. He had to throw to beat up injured Julian Edelman, who led the league in drops, and Mohamed Sanu, who isn't even on the team anymore, and their first-round pick N'Keal Harry, who couldn't outrun me. And their running back situation was Burkhead and James White, and neither one of them were necessarily fantastic. Sony Michel was in and out of the doghouse. They didn't have a notable tight end. Their receiving core was ranked at the bottom of the league. They were the worst at separation, so Brady couldn't even really throw it to an open guy. He had to throw all of his guys open, if anything. It just wasn't a good year. And couple that with the fact that he is getting older, he was having problems at home, it was probably adding a lot of stress to his life, which is going to impact anybody's personality. When all you feel is stress at work and at home, and you're dealing with all these problems, it is bound to make you a bit more irritable. So I definitely believe that teammates of his probably got a bit, pretty sick and tired of his attitude, especially the younger players on their team. You're dealing with a player who's for some of these guys, 20, 15 years older than them. I'd imagine it probably gets pretty annoying if all he is snappy and barking at you. So he goes to Tampa Bay, where he's with a younger roster, a better roster. The offensive line, you'd assume, is probably better. The receiving core is obviously better. The defense, while not better, at least not at the beginning of the season, at this point, it might be better given all the opt-outs the Patriots have had. The only area I think they're not better at is in the secondary, but front seven, linebacking core, better. They have a better chance to win this year because the Chiefs aren't in the NFC. So I can totally get why Brady left. And then what the Patriots do, they were originally going to go with Jarrett Stidham, but they brought in Cam Newton, and by all accounts, Cam Newton is exactly what the Patriots wanted. He's exactly what the Patriots needed. He's a team captain. He's the starter. And I think the Patriots are going to be in a very good position heading forward. The question is, does Bill Belichick maybe change his way? Does Bill Belichick himself become a bit less rigid so they can have this new culture in New England? Or will it just kind of go back to the same thing? How much of it was Brady? How much of it was Bill Belichick? I have no idea. That's up for everybody else to just go ahead and interpret themselves. But when I read this article, I'm not surprised. I'm just not surprised. I definitely understand that the younger players on the team were probably really tired of Brady and probably wanted him gone. Even though he is the GOAT. Even though he is the greatest quarterback of all time. There's only so long that you can bark at people. And that's why they say the same thing with Bill Belichick. There's only so long that Brady would allow him to bark at him the way that it's reported that he does, ringing them out in team meetings, in film sessions, just laying into Brady. There's only so long you can do that before he's gonna go, dude, do you know who I am? I'm Tom frickin' Brady. I won you all of your rings. Who are you talking to? There's only so long. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that his attitude became a bit more irritable after the 2018 season. I think that you combine what was going on with the roster, the fact that they tried to push him out in exchange for Jimmy Garoppolo, what was going on at home, but between he and his wife. I just think Brady, he looks at the clock and he sees he has a limited amount of time to play, and he didn't think he was going to be able to get that done in New England. So as soon as he had a chance to be a free agent, he took it and he went elsewhere. I think it makes perfect sense. And, which team is in the better position? I would honestly say, in the long run, I think New England is in a better position. Because the Bucs, over these next 2 years, I am assuming they're probably going to look pretty good. They're probably going to be pretty good and have really high draft picks. Or low draft picks, whichever way you want to look at it. So are they going to be able to draft a franchise quarterback? I don't think so. Maybe that's why they have Josh Rosen on the practice squad, so that once Brady does leave, they have Rosen right there and they'll know what he's like. But New England, in the meantime, I think they're going to be worse. I think they're going to have a better opportunity to actually trade up to get a quarterback. They have a better chance to have a higher or lower draft pick, again, whichever way you want to look at it, and trade up. So I'd say in the long run, probably New England is in a better place. But in the short term, definitely Tampa Bay's better. Tampa Bay has the better shot to actually win, and I am interested to see how this all works out. But it was a very interesting article. Anyways, coming up next, Deshaun Watson. He got a big extension from the Texans. I want to talk about how I feel like that is going to affect Dak and if Dak Prescott deserved this kind of contract as compared to Deshaun Watson. That coming up next, and final topic of the day. I'm going to rank my top 10 games for NFL Week 1 action. That coming later. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Tom Brady and how some of the Patriots players are actually at peace with Brady having left. And in fact, some of the players, if not the majority of the players, actually wanted him gone. And again, I completely understand why Brady was probably ticked off over his last 2 years in New England. Cause just think about it again, just to kind of do a quick little recap here. Tom Brady, he's getting older. He can see the finish line. He needs to maximize his last few years as much as possible. And he's looking at this Patriots roster and he's seeing it's not really getting better. The draft picks, they're not really hitting. The players that they're trading for aren't really hitting. He can see the writing on the wall. And so he's getting ticked off about that. He's getting ticked off about the fact that Bill Belichick never really seems to praise him, never really seems to wrap his arms around him, wanted to play Jimmy Garoppolo over him, so he had to get him shipped out of New England. He's having issues at home because his wife didn't feel like he was carrying, he was holding up his end of the bargain at home, so wrote him a letter, basically said, I've got a foot out the door, I've got one bag packed, I need you to step up. And Brady was dealing with all that over his last 2 years. This past season had one that's probably statistically his worst year, or one of his worst years since he first became the starter in New England in early 2000. Back when at that point in time, I guess you'd say he's probably just more of a game manager. This past season, he looked very, very game manager-esque. This was not a great last season for him. So what does he do? He goes to Tampa Bay. He's in a much better situation, surrounded by much better weapons. We'll see how the defense performs. I like the front seven, as I said. The secondary is a bit suspect. We will see how the secondary holds up. Pass rush and secondary go hand in hand. So if that pass rush is cooking, the secondary will be better. They do have a good young corner in Jamel Dean, who came on last year. I'm interested to see how he plays. But all in all, I understand why Brady was upset. I understand why his attitude might have become a bit more doer, but nonetheless, I think it was a vibe change that the Patriots needed. They needed a change, and Cam Newton has provided that change, and I cannot wait to see the Patriots play. But staying on the topic of quarterbacks, another quarterback just got paid, and his name is not Dak Prescott, his name is Deshaun Watson. who, let me go ahead and say very quickly, I believe is better than Dak Prescott. Deshaun Watson signed a 4-year, $160 million extension with the Texans, and I do not remember the guaranteed money off the top of my head, but I believe he got more guaranteed money than Mahomes, which is a big deal that people made. And while people can go ahead and say this is a better contract, I think it just kind of goes to show Deshaun Watson wanted more guaranteed money. Mahomes didn't really care for it. What he got, and he was fine with it. Mahomes, he has made it very clear why he signed the deal that he did. He wanted it to be team friendly because he wants to keep players around him. Okay, let's just go ahead and put that to bed. Let's not try and compare these contracts, talk about who got the better contract and who didn't. Mahomes is going to make, probably by the end of his career, the most money in NFL history. Let's stop picking it apart. Mahomes is going to be fine. But relating to Deshaun Watson's deal, I do think it's interesting. First of all, I think he deserved every penny of it. I would even say he probably deserved more. I think this contract makes him the second highest paid quarterback annually, right behind Patrick Mahomes. And I think he's worth every penny of it because, let's be honest, he has carried the Texans when they haven't really given them too much to work with. And this is kind of the argument I want to use as to why it is that he deserved this deal more than Dak Prescott. Because when we look at Dak Prescott, let's be honest, he came into the league to a very stacked roster. Not necessarily on the defensive side, but on the offensive side of the football. What more could he have really asked for? He still had Dez Bryant at least 1 year when he was still pretty damn good. Obviously, he kind of fell out of favor there in the second and third year, I believe. I don't know. Did he make it to... I don't remember if he made it to Dak's third year or not. But he kind of fell out of favor after that first year, and ultimately he ended up leaving. But you look at the offensive line, number 1 in the NFL. They had Ezekiel Elliott, who for the first 3 years of his career, and I say the first 3 years because in his second year, and obviously he had the suspension and everything, he led the league in yards per game. He would have led the league in rushing yards 3 straight years. So he had that at his disposal. He had Cole Beasley, who's a very good slot receiver. They eventually traded for Amari Cooper. All in all, Dak Prescott had a much better situation than Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson came into the NFL to one of the worst offensive lines, to a receiver in Will Fuller who can't stay healthy. He's a go route away from hurting his hamstring. He has basically Nuke Hopkins or bust. Even at tight end. Who was it? I think Fedorowicz, he ended up retiring. And I don't remember who their other tight end is. They've kind of had a revolving door at tight end. I think they now finally found their guy. But they've been trying to figure out the tight end situation. At running back, they haven't been great. It was Lamar Miller, who is fine. He's a fine running back, but he's not elite. He's not one of the top guys you think of in the league. And now, obviously, you look at his surrounding situations this year. Let's look at what he has. He still has one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, but he does have Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. They did finally invest in a left tackle, so that's nice. You look at receiver, it's Brandon Cooks, it's Will Fuller, it's Kiki QT. All 3 of these guys have injury histories. Brandon Cooks is a concussion away from missing the season. Will Fuller, like I said, he's a go route away from a pulled hamstring. Kiki QT, he seems to just kinda, when he's on the field, he seems pretty good. But it's a knick-knack injury here and there, it's a hamstring, it's whatever. And as for like the rest of the supporting cast, tight end, running back, I mean, is there really anybody special at the tight end situation? I think they have a guy named Thomas, I don't really know. That's probably my fault. I don't know. Maybe he's a superstar and I just don't know him. Who knows? When it comes to running back, they have the 2 Johnsons, Duke and David. I like Duke more than I like David, especially when it comes to the price tag of both, because I think David at this point in time is drastically overpaid. Maybe we'll see. He was part of that big lucrative deal for DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe Bill O'Brien is gonna unleash David and he's gonna look like his old self. I have no idea. He got hurt and then he just hasn't looked the same. And then just speaking of Bill O'Brien, can we just talk about the coaching situations of both? I think there's a lot of things we can bring up here as to why it is that Deshaun deserved this deal more than Dak Prescott. Bill O'Brien, he is regarded right now by many sources, by many articles, many people, they think he's the worst head coach in the NFL. They think he's actually costing his team points. And I can't say I disagree. You look at just some of his decision making. I've pointed out a few examples in Deshaun Watson's rookie year against Seattle. They had Seattle dead to rights. All they needed to do was just pick up a first down, make Seattle waste the remaining timeouts, they would have won the game. What does Bill O'Brien do? He ran the ball 3 times for basically nothing, punted to Seattle, Seattle won the game. You look at against the Chiefs, they were up 21-0. They were at it was like 4th and 2, 4 and 1 on the Chiefs side of the field, and instead of going for it, they kick a field goal. But then when they're at midfield, and it's 4th and short, they go for a fake punt. And I'm not going to say that was wrong to do, but it just doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't go for it on their side of the field, but you would on your side of the field. Doesn't make any sense. Bill O'Brien's decision making is very questionable. And I've said before, I think you could look at his resume, and you look at what he's done in his division, and you think to yourself, man, he's been great, though. I mean, look at all the division titles he's won. He wins his division year after year after year. In 3 years with Deshaun Watson, he's won the division twice. And let's be honest, in those 3 years, he's only fully started the season twice. One of the seasons, he had a lung issue. I think he had like a punctured lung, something like that. He couldn't fly on planes. He had to take the bus. Deshaun Watson has battled through injuries. He's had to deal with not the best coaching in the world, with not the best supporting cast. He's been running for his life every single year. He's among the most sacked quarterbacks. This is not what Dak has had to deal with. Dak Prescott came into the league to the best offensive line, to the best running back, to an easy division. And there's people out there who would say, that Deshaun Watson's division is also very easy. I mean, he has to go through the Jags and the Colts and the Titans. That's not really difficult. I understand what people mean. But at least when Deshaun Watson like I said, he's been in the league now 3 years. 2 years he's been the full-time starter. He won the division both of those years. Dak Prescott has been the starter since day one, and he has won the division twice, but in the other years, he's gone 9-7, 8-8. In this past year especially, I am really gonna hold it against Dak Prescott. They had that division dead to rights. They were like 3 games up on the Eagles. All they had to do was win one more game, and they were in the playoffs. They didn't even need to worry about it. And they lost out. And then even if we're going to talk about his second year when they went 9-7 and Ezekiel Elliott got suspended, and people want to say, oh, but Tyron Smith, he got hurt. Are you going to tell me that when a team, you lose your starting left tackle and you're literally unable to score points with the rest of that offensive line? Because keep in mind, Frederick was still there. Zach Martin was still there. You're going to tell me Lyle Collins was still there. You're telling me that you can't even really score points. You can't even look competitive? That is a terrible excuse. And a running back shouldn't make that big of a difference. In today's NFL, the running back should not be that big of a difference. So, I hold that against Dak. And this last season especially, I am very much so going to hold this against Dak. I think Deshaun Watson has shown himself to be a better quarterback so far. He's had less to work with, probably the worst head coach. And even when I look at this upcoming season and I look at the Texans and I look at the Cowboys with Mike McCarthy now, and now they have supposedly 3 receivers who are going to be 1,000-yard receivers with Cooper and Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. Honestly, I still think that the Texans are probably going to finish with a better record. I still think Deshaun Watson is going to be able to make some magic. I don't know if I can really bet on their receivers all being able to stay healthy. But I've seen what Deshaun Watson's done throughout his career and what he's had to work with. Always had the worst offensive line. Has always had the worst running back situation. You could maybe say they've had the same tight end situation. Jason Witten couldn't really run anymore, and I don't know, the Texans tight ends, they're tight ends. So maybe you could say they've had the same tight end situation. But then at receiver, Dak has always at least had 2 decent receivers, whereas Deshaun Watson, while he has had DeAndre Hopkins, that is all he's had. Will Fuller can't stay healthy. Now, especially look at this season, their receiving core is the all IR team. I don't want any of these guys to get hurt. I want these guys to stay healthy because I want to see what Deshaun Watson can do this season. I think he's going to need all the help he can get, especially with Hopkins now being gone. But Will Fuller can't stay healthy. And Brandon Cooks can't seem to stay healthy. And Kiki QT can't seem to stay healthy. So, just if history has shown us anything, these guys will at some point get hurt. But you look at this past season, right, and how much I hold it against Dak. And even though Dak had all these numbers and had statistically his career year, and Pro Football Focus graded him as he had the highest wins above replacement in the league, or at least he was like number 2 in the NFL. When I look at Deshaun Watson this past season, let's just go with this. Dak Prescott couldn't beat winning teams. He just couldn't. It's documented. He couldn't beat winning teams. Couldn't beat a playoff team. And if you really want to count that Eagles team that he beat early in the season as his win against a playoff team, okay, sure. Go ahead and count that. But I look at Deshaun Watson this past season. Even though the Texans, they finished 10-6, like they weren't fantastic, but they still won their division, and Deshaun Watson was the highest graded quarterback last season against playoff teams. Had a grade of 84.5. He was the highest graded quarterback last season against playoff teams. If you look at his career grade in the fourth quarter and overtime, that is money time, that's when the game is on the line, he has a higher Pro Football Focus grade than Patrick Mahomes. And we all know what Patrick Mahomes is. He has a higher career grade in the fourth quarter and overtime. And if you want to say that Pro Football Focus's measures are crap or their analytics are crap, if you want to go ahead and dismiss it, then that's fine. I don't. I believe Pro Football Focus. I believe in their metrics. Are they all perfect? Not really. Especially when it comes to offensive linemen, they're still kind of trying to figure out how to grade them, but their rankings are still pretty accurate. They know what they're looking at. They know what they see in Deshaun Watson. I know what I see in Deshaun Watson. I saw it at Clemson. I saw it his rookie year. I saw it his second year, his third year, and I feel like we're going to see it again this year. And I just think the Texans, they know it. They know what they have. They know what they've surrounded him with. They know what hasn't been the best, and yet he has still made chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. When it comes to Dak, the Cowboys look, and they're like, did you see what we gave you last year? We gave you Ezekiel Elliott. You had one of the best offensive lines. We gave you Amari Cooper. We gave you Michael Gallup. We gave you Randall Cobb. We brought back Jason Witten. You still had Blake Jarwin, and even though they didn't really give him too many of the snaps because Jason Witten, for whatever reason, was the starter, whatever. You look at that team, and you look at their defense. Their defense wasn't spectacular, but it was still pretty good. And what did Dak give them last year? He gave them 8-8. And then he really went to the table demanding a 4-year deal. And the Cowboys were like, hold on. What have you done for us? What have you given us? Especially this last year. What did you give us? You gave us a bunch of numbers and they resulted in nothing. They did not result in wins. They didn't result in a playoff berth. They probably sat there and they were like, Dak, all we had to do was win one game. With like 4 games left in the season, all you had to do was win one game. Our division was so bad. You had to win one game and we were in. And you couldn't do it. Why would we give you this deal? Whereas when it comes to Deshaun says he wants a 4-year deal. The Texans go, oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. We got you. Yeah, no, here's the money. Here, take it all. Take it all, please. With Dak, they're going to make him work for it. And I have said, I think I went public. I don't remember when I said this, but I know on the podcast I said this. I would not be surprised. In fact, I would be certain enough to put money down. Dak Prescott, he will not finish his career as a Cowboy. And I would even say this next season, I don't think he'll be a Cowboy. I just don't think the Cowboys trust him enough. They put the franchise tag on him. How often have teams put a franchise tag on the quarterback with the intent to actually keep him? It doesn't happen. Washington franchise tagged Kirk. Kirk did not finish his career in Washington. He got franchise tagged twice, and he moved to Minnesota. I think that the Chargers franchise tagged Drew Brees. Drew Brees did not finish his career with the Chargers. He's finishing that in New Orleans. If history dictates anything, if history says anything, Dak is not going to finish his career with the Cowboys, and more than likely, he is not going to see a second contract from the Cowboys. Deshaun Watson, I think he was worth every penny of the deal, and I just think given what he's had to work with and what he has done in the conference he's in the division he is in, with the head coach he has, I think Deshaun Watson has proven to everybody that he deserves this deal over Dak Prescott. That's just my opinion. You don't have to necessarily agree with me, but it's what I feel. Anyways, coming up next, we're going to get into my top 10 games for NFL Week 1 action. I'm going to rank them 10 to 1. I'm going to talk about some of the things I'm looking forward to, why it is I'm looking forward to it, all that good stuff. Thank you for tuning in today. Stay tuned for my final topic of the day, that coming up shortly.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment talked about Deshaun Watson's extension and why it is that I feel like he deserved an extension more over Dak. I still think Dak is going to get an extension or at least a contract from somewhere. I just don't think it's going to be from Dallas. And to the people out there wondering why it is that, Deshaun Watson got this contract over Dak and everything, I just think Deshaun Watson deserved it more. I think he's proven to be the better quarterback. He has put up really good numbers. And I think if you actually kind of put up their side-by-side numbers over the last 2 years, they're pretty identical, and Deshaun Watson has had way less to work with, and I actually think that he's actually won more than Dak over these last 2 years, and yet Dak has still had the better supporting cast. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it goes to show, I think Deshaun Watson's proven he's just a better quarterback. Some people, they might not agree. Some people think that Dak has shown it, he's been in the league longer, he's shown more consistency, maybe. I don't know. What have you done for me lately? Well, lately Deshaun Watson has been the better quarterback, in my mind. I don't know. Anyways. So week 1 of the NFL is approaching. Well, I guess actually it's here. And there's going to be a bunch of games. I went ahead and I looked at all the games. I took 10 of them and I ranked them 10 to 1 for games that I am the most excited to see. I think there's a lot of stories this season. I've mentioned most of them, and each individual team has certain things that I'm looking for. Each individual team has changed some things about them that I want to see how it works, whether it be a coaching change or a roster change, maybe an offensive line change, whatever it might be, and I want to see how it works out. So let's go ahead and let's get into this. At number 10, I have the Seahawks and the Falcons. I generally do not care for the Falcons. I don't think they're going to be a great team. I don't think they're going to be an awful team. They're probably going to hover around 500 like they normally do. There's not really much I want to see involving them. Everything I want to see in this game revolves around the Seahawks. And it's not just because I'm a Seahawk fan, and it's not just because I'm a Russell Wilson fan. It's because I think there's some interesting stories with this team. Number 1, how does this defense look? This is arguably the worst defense that Pete Carroll has had in the Russell Wilson era. I'm interested to see, how does its pass rush look? Because right now, it's ranked bottom of the league by Pro Football Focus. The secondary is intriguing. Some recent texts came out about Quentin Dunbar that don't bode well for the Seahawks, but I haven't seen any update on it affecting his eligibility. I guess we'll wait and see. But I want to see how the secondary performs. I'm interested to see how this new revamped offensive line performs. I want to see how the play calling looks. I want to see, do they continue to call plays like Blake Bortles is their quarterback, or do they let Russ cook? Russell Wilson has another year of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they've signed Josh Gordon again, they have Greg Olsen, who is arguably Russell Wilson's best tight end that he has ever had. It's not Jimmy Graham, it's not Jacob Hollister, it wasn't Zach Miller. By far, I believe it is Greg Olsen. I am very curious to see how this game looks, because I honestly would not be surprised if the Seahawks lost week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons beat them. I think Julio Jones is an animal. I think Ridley's shown himself to be great. They have Todd Gurley. Maybe that's the only thing I'm looking forward to with Atlanta, is how does Todd Gurley fit into the whole equation. But other than that, I think it's all Seahawks, and that's the only team I'm really looking to see during that game. At number 9, I have the Steelers versus the Giants. Now, originally, I had the Titans and the Broncos here, but then I realized I actually don't really care about how the outcome of that game goes. I don't care if Drew Lock wins. I don't care if Ryan Tannehill and the Titans win. I really don't care. But I do care about the Steelers. And here's why. And I guess, with the Giants. With the Giants, the thing is just how does Daniel Jones look in year 2? He has a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. The head coach was a special teams guy in New England. Unproven. We'll see how he looks in this shortened, no rookie training camp, shortened practices, no preseason, everything. We'll see how it looks. And, seeing Daniel Jones in year 2. But when it comes to the Steelers, I want to see how Ben looks. If the Giants defense is not good, this should be a defense that Ben Roethlisberger should be able to take advantage of. If Ben Roethlisberger doesn't look good, if he struggles against the Giants, maybe you could say it's just week 1 and he just needs some time to warm up. Or maybe it could be that Ben Roethlisberger isn't the same. If this offense doesn't look good, with Juju Smith-Schuster, with James Washington, I know they drafted another receiver, I just can't remember his name, but he's apparently really impressed in their training camps, and they still have James Conner, they still have a good offensive line, their defense last year was incredible. Minkah Fitzpatrick was a fantastic acquisition they made in the trade with Miami, so I'm interested to see how the Steelers play. If the Steelers don't play well or they lose, I think that could say a lot about Ben Roethlisberger. I think the defense is still going to be good. I think it's just all on Ben. This team won 8 games last year with Hodges and Rudolph at quarterback. They should be able to win double-digit games with Ben. I just don't know if it's going to happen. At number 8, I have the Colts and the Jaguars. Now, the reason why I have this game here is mainly because of the Colts. I care about the Colts. Phillip Rivers is now their quarterback. Presumably, he should be better than Jacoby Brissett. He actually will push the ball down the field. I think he's more accurate than Jacoby Brissett. And the biggest thing is, Phillip Rivers under pressure isn't great. The Colts have the best offensive line in football. He is going to have nothing but time. And I'm interested to see some of their draft picks. Michael Pittman, I think could be a really, really good receiver in this league. He's big, works hard, was good in college. I think that he could be a real good draft pick. And they drafted a running back, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize, but their running back, if he wins the starting job, which I don't know if he has or not, should be an absolute home run hit, especially with the offensive line being what it is. When it comes to receiving, to the receiving core, it's not necessarily great out of T.Y. Hilton, and T.Y. Hilton is getting older and more injury prone. I do like their tight end, Jack Doyle. Their defense is young and improving. Jonathan Taylor, the running back they drafted, Jonathan Taylor. I think he can be a really, really good player, especially behind this offensive line. And then you just kind of look at the team they're facing. They're facing the Jaguars. Their defense is not great. Their offense at this point also really isn't that great. Like I said, I still like Minshew. I like Chark. I like Westbrook. I like the majority of their offensive line. I'm interested to see what they do now at running back because it is a weak point. But this should be a game I think the Colts can run away with. But if they don't, it could really just scream that Phillip Rivers is a shot fighter, that he is just no longer a good quarterback. I don't think that's the case. I think he still has at least a year or two left in him if he wants it and in the right situation. I don't think the Colts are going to be a Super Bowl contender this year, but I am interested to see how the Colts look and how Phillip Rivers looks in a new uniform finally. At number 7, I have the Jets versus the Bills. Now, the only reason why I really care about this game is because of this hype surrounding the Bills. There are so many power rankings and predictions that have the Bills winning the division. Do people not realize Josh Allen still has yet to throw for 4,000 yards in the season? He has still yet to complete 60% of his passes in a season. He is still one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks, if not the most inaccurate quarterback in the league. And you're telling me that they're just gonna run away with this division? I don't think so. Now I think they're gonna beat the Jets. The Jets. I think they're gonna beat the Jets. But do I think it's going to be a runaway game? Not really. I think the Jets can at least keep it close, but I think the only reason they're going to keep it close is because Josh Allen will keep it close for them. I want to see if he grows. I want to see if this acquisition of Stephon Diggs is just what he needed. I don't know. I think the defense is still going to be good. I like the coaching staff. I like the roster as a whole. I think they've done everything in their power to surround Josh Allen with the right pieces so that he can be somewhat moderately successful. But I don't think this is going to be the new rebirth of New England. I don't think this is going to be the new powerhouse team in the AFC East until I see New England dethroned and until I see Josh Allen complete 60% of his passes. I don't think it's going to happen. But with this game, I'm interested to see how do the Jets look with their opt-outs. Losing Mosley and Adams and their receiving core is awful. Le'Veon Bell doesn't seem to really be happy with the Jets, and their head coach apparently doesn't get along with any of their players. So I'm curious to see how that all looks. And then for the Bills, it's just Josh Allen's progression. How does he look in year 3? Does he take a gigantic leap, or do the Bills actually start to look for another quarterback? At number 6, I have the Cowboys and the Rams. Now, this game I think could be high scoring. I think it could be a real flex between, obviously, Sean McVay and Mike McCarthy pairing with Kellen Moore to call plays. I don't know if Kellen Moore is going to have solely all of the play calling. I think there might be some influence from Mike McCarthy, but I do believe they're going to keep the play calling mainly the same to help out Dak Prescott because this is such a wonky year and everything. But nonetheless, I'm interested to see a few things with the Cowboys. I want to see, how does Dak look playing with the pressure of the franchise tag? How does he look now that his Hall of Fame center Travis Frederick is gone? The difference in the offensive line with Frederick and without Frederick was a real thing. They performed significantly worse without Travis Frederick. You can't just replace a Hall of Fame center, so I'm interested to see how that all looks. They now have 3 really good wide receivers, and by all reports, apparently CeeDee Lamb looks the best in training camp. They're saying he's going to be the new number 1. I don't know if I believe that because they just paid Amari Cooper $20 million. Are they going to pay him $20 million to be a number 2 receiver? And then they have to think about what they're going to do with Gallup. Are they going to trade Gallup? Are they going to pay Gallup? Have no idea what's going to happen there. The defense, their defensive line, Lawrence, now they have Dontari Poe, they have Aldon Smith, Randy Gregory, the linebacking core should be back to full strength with Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch. The secondary is going to struggle. And then when it comes to the Rams, I want to see, what do they look like without Todd Gurley? And how does their offensive line perform? Because last year, their offensive line took a big step back. It was not nearly as good. Jared Goff was under a lot more pressure, and he did not look good. He looked closer to the Jared Goff of his rookie season than he did either of the other 2 years. The Cowboys have Super Bowl aspirations. The Rams are trying to get back into the playoffs because they went to the Super Bowl, obviously had a stinker, and then the next season they didn't make the playoffs. They want to try and make the playoffs again and try and make another run. So this could be, I think this is going to be a very high scoring game. It could have the potential to be a very high scoring game. The Rams receiving core is still there. I mean, this is going to be a battle between 2 of the top wide receiving cores in the NFL and 2 really good play callers. We will see how that all shapes out. At number 5, I have the Texans and the Chiefs. I think this game is going to be really, really good. I'm excited to see Mahomes and Watson duel out again, but I think I know what this game is going to be. I think the Chiefs are going to dominate, and I think they're going to just completely outcoach Bill O'Brien. So, I don't know. There's not really much to say about this game. I want to see how the Texans look with their new receiving core and their new running back David Johnson, and see how they make up for the loss of DeAndre Hopkins. But then when it comes to the Chiefs, I feel like I know what I'm going to get from them. If anything, they've only upgraded at running back. while their offensive line, they did lose Duvernay Tardif because he decided to go ahead and opt out and use his medical degree to actually go and help people. Very admirable. I've said before, I think he should already be Walter Payton Man of the Year. But I think I know what I'm going to get from this game. The Chiefs are going to dominate. I think they're going to win. I think Bill O'Brien is, again, going to be exposed as the inferior head coach. And while I think Watson will be Watson, and he'll be able to make some plays and put up good numbers, I just don't think it will be enough to beat the Chiefs. At number 4, I have the Bengals and the Chargers. This is going to be exciting. The Bengals, I've said, I think the Bengals are going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And what a week 1 for Joe Burrow to go up against. He's going to go up against arguably the best secondary in the league. And it is such a blow that the Chargers lost Derwin James. But the rest of that secondary is still there. There is still Chris Harris Jr., Casey Hayward, Desmond King, that pass rush with Ingram and Bosa is still there. The linebacking core, again, is arguably the weakest point of this defense, but the defensive line's great. The secondary is still great. And at safety, it is an easier position to replace more than corner. So I don't think they're gonna take I don't think they're gonna be now awful because they lost Derwin James. I still think they'll be formidable because of their corners. But then it comes down to Tyrod Taylor. How does Taylor play? Taylor is a low turnover guy. While he doesn't push the ball down the field like Phillip Rivers, he doesn't necessarily need to do that. He's accurate enough of a thrower. He's mobile enough to get some first downs if they play more of an offense, kind of like the Ravens. They still have Hunter Henry back. I think the Chargers could be really, really good, and I think they're going to terrorize Joe Burrow. And I kind of want to see, how does Joe Burrow hold up to the pressure? Does he start to flinch? Does he start to, make erratic decisions? How does he look? This guy was the number 1 overall pick. And he is not only being thrown into the fire with one of the worst organizations in NFL history, he's being thrown into the fire against a elite defense. So I'm very curious to see how that all shapes out. I think Burrow is going to look terrible week 1, but I am here to see the game. At number 3, I have the Patriots versus the Dolphins. Can we be honest? The New England is going to be so much more exciting to watch this season with Cam Newton than Jarrett Stidham. I know a lot of people probably wanted to see what Jarrett Stidham could be. A lot of people wanted to see, could Bill Belichick actually take this guy in his second year, put him as the starter and go to the playoffs or something. But how fun would that have been to watch? Cam Newton with Bill Belichick? This is going to be must-see TV. The only thing that would make this game better would be if they actually had Tua starting the game, but he's not, and I guess for good reason. You do not want him to go against Bill Belichick, because Bill Belichick is going to embarrass him. Even though they've had players opt out, they still have that secondary, J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore. They still got the McCourty twins. Those dudes can all play. And Bill Belichick, he would come up with some kind of game plan to force Tua into terrible, terrible decision throws. So I understand why it is they're going to have him sit. But Fitzpatrick, he'll go out there, he'll do his thing. I think that he'll perform relatively well. But all my eyes are on Cam Newton. He is the only thing I care about in that game. I want to see how Cam Newton plays week 1. I don't think the Dolphins defense is that great still, even though they have upgraded at corner. They have Howard and they have Byron Jones, and they've, signed some other players. I think they signed Shaq Lawson, to a deal, and he's a solid pass rusher. So I'm interested to see how all the pieces go, work together. But all in all, I'm here for Cam. I think Cam's gonna play great, and he is the only thing I care about when it comes to that game. At number 2, I have the Browns and the Ravens. I think for obvious reasons. The Browns were the only team, other than the Chiefs, to beat the Ravens this last year. And that was with Freddie Kitchens calling plays. Now it's Kevin Stefanski. This should be a system that suits Baker much better. They still have their 2 tight ends. Stefanski loves using 2 tight end sets. He has 2 good running backs, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, David Njoku. The offensive line is better and is still, you would assume, is going to be head and shoulders above where it was this last year. On defense, they did lose some pieces. They obviously, Grant Delpit's no longer there. Joe Schobert's no longer there, but the pass rush is still there. Myles Garrett got paid. Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams, those guys are still there. Olivier Vernon, Sheldon Richardson. I think this should be a really, really good team. And I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to beat the Ravens, because I think that Baltimore is going to come out and they're going to come out with a full head of steam, play their game, and they're probably going to run Cleveland off the field, especially with the addition of Calais Campbell. Obviously Marcus Peters still there, Marlon Humphrey, a motivated Lamar Jackson who really wants to prove to everybody that he was deserving of the MVP. He knows he didn't perform well in the playoffs. He knows in 2 playoff games he's been terrible. Lost to the Chargers, lost to Tennessee when they were the number 1 seed. I think they're going to go in there and they're going to steamroll Cleveland. But I still expect Cleveland to look competitive. I still expect them to look good and put up points. I just think that the Ravens are going to flat out outscore them. But that's my number 2, and at number 1, some people might be able to guess what this is. I have the Saints and the Buccaneers. I cannot wait to see Drew Brees and Tom Brady in the same division, and we get to see them twice, but we especially get to see them week 1. I think if there was any other game to replace the opener of the Chiefs and the Texans, it would be the Bucs and the Saints. Now, when it comes to who's going to win this game, I'm going to take the Saints to win the game, but I cannot wait to see Michael Thomas with a true number 2 receiver next to him in Emmanuel Sanders. Jared Cook is an underrated tight end. Even though he's in his 30s, he is still very good. Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, the offensive line is younger and you would assume is probably just as good, if not maybe even a little bit better. Drew Brees in his last year, this is his last year playing. I'm interested to see how much did they use Taysom Hill, because he is supposed to be the future starter of this team. So do they incorporate more plays with him passing? I have no idea, but I want to see that. And then when it comes to, Tampa Bay, I've basically said everything that you need to know. Tom Brady, new team with Gronk coming out of retirement, Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, some of the receivers that they drafted, their defense is good. Leonard Fournette, LaShawn McCoy, Ronald Jones. I think this is going to be a solid team. I don't know if I'm going to take them to just be the runaway favorite to make the Super Bowl, or necessarily even to be a high winning team in the playoffs, because I still think there is a learning curve to learning a new system, and Bruce Arians' offense forever has been a throw it down the field style offense. That's an offense that Brady has never really had outside of his 2007 year with Randy Moss, and none of these guys are Randy Moss. So every quarterback in their first year with Bruce Arians leads the league in turnover-worthy plays. If Tom Brady is different, okay, so be it. But I think there's like 4 different quarterbacks that Bruce Arians has had in their first year with them. They led the league in turnover-worthy plays. If Brady breaks the narrative, well then okay, I guess he just broke the streak. But until it's broken, I'm going to say Brady, he's probably going to throw a few more picks than he normally does. He'll probably put that ball in harm's way a bit. I think Mike Evans is on the injury report, so I don't know if he is going to play or not, but he is on the injury report for a hamstring. I haven't seen anybody on the Saints injury report, at least as of now, to note. I think it's going to be a great game, a battle between 2 surefire first ballot Hall of Famers, 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I think the Saints are going to win it. I do expect the Bucs to look good and to at least put up some points, but ultimately I will take the Saints in what is going to be Drew Brees' last year. So to go ahead and reiterate my teams from 10 to 1 for the games that I am looking forward to the most, I have the Seahawks versus the Falcons, Steelers versus Giants, Colts versus Jags, Jets versus Bills, Cowboys versus Rams, Texans versus Chiefs, Bengals versus Chargers, Pats versus Dolphins, Browns versus Ravens, and last but not least, Saints versus the Bucs. NFL is here, and I cannot wait to start watching some games. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.